Sandra Denise Ware back here with following up on part 2 of Judge Gorsuch. I promised you 2 aspects of his writings that I would dig down deep on. I just finished with Thomas Jefferson. Now, Judge Gorsuch spent a couple of pages on the Nazi regime, and his point in doing that was to point out that that regime practiced eugenics, and that led, of course, to euthanasia. And the dark feature that he sees for America, if we do not stop physician-assisted suicide, is that we will begin euthanizing people who we deem to not be worthy of life. And I have no problems with that, but it's the fact that when he talked about the Nazis, that was his only scope. The scope should have been much, much wider as far as the Nazi regime applies to what's happening inside the United States right now. Well, at any rate, Judge Gorsuch goes on to basically say that if people were not depressed, they would never seek out physician-assisted suicide. He goes on to say that it is, in fact, the depression that kills people. In other words, he uses an example. You have cancer in both your breasts. The doctor gives you 6 weeks to live. You call out for physician-assisted suicide. When you die from physician-assisted suicide, it's the depression that was your murderer. That's what killed you. So that dovetails in exactly with what is happening in the United States now. The belief that the state has the right to intervene to stop you from committing suicide, and that they are on the hunt for depression, for depressed moods, for sadness. Because if you are depressed, you have an increased possibility of committing suicide. And before I tie that all together, I need to bring in some 4 common points about the Nazi regime. Well, first point, they rolled out tremendous medical surveillance. And that's exactly what we're doing right now. For instance, Cures Now rolls out the psychiatric questionnaires, the psych screening test, from babyhood to kindergarten to all through school, through university to at work. I think you can start to expect to see the rolling out of these psychiatric screenings. Now, if the state finds you to be sad or of a depressed mood, it has every right to intervene, because life and death is at stake, because you might end up committing suicide. But because life and death is at stake, there is no limit to the interference in your life. This is where we get to forced drugging as a preventative measure. And if you followed the Cures Now bill as it was argued, you notice that over and over and over again, they emphasize so much how this is a preventative measure. At the very first sign of mental decay were some of the phrases that were used. The phrase was used, this is going to be used to prevent the onset of mental illness. Well, just to bring in another aspect of this, if we accept that depression is the killer, what would happen if we're looking into possible futures? What I see happening is, what would happen if you were going to die from, I don't know, your double cancer in both your breasts, but instead a doctor intervened, and instead of you saying, well, I'm so sad, I just can't stand that, let me die next week through physician-assisted suicide. I don't want any more pain, or I don't want to spend any more money, or whatever it is. The doctor simply says, well, that's going to kill you. I have a right to intervene. And so what I'm going to do is drug you to make you happy during the next 6 weeks. I can use a drug to loft you, I use the word loft for a reason, to loft you into a state of forced euphoria. I can use antipsychotics to numb you down so that you basically, when you're told that you're dying from a disease, you just go, oh, really? Pass the cookies. If that doesn't work, well, then the doctor has the right to simply lock you up and keep you in such a drugged state that you're mostly asleep for 20 of the 24 hours. You don't even see the illness coming on, your death coming on. He only has to spend money on this for 6 weeks. It's your money that's being spent for 6 weeks. So it's sort of like a train coming at you in the middle of the night. Hey, if you don't see it coming, did you really suffer? I have another example. If it's the depression, as Judge Gorsuch says, that kills you, what happens if a person, could be man, could be woman, is gang raped by 12 people? And within 30 minutes, they make it to the hospital and they are screaming, I'm going to kill myself. I cannot live with the memory of this. You know that nowadays there are drugs that can be administered to make you forget a painful surgery. So why not administer those drugs to make you forget the rape that you just underwent? If you give them within a certain amount of time, I understand they can wipe your recent memory. Well, if you want those drugs, that has one philosophical implication for the culture. But what happens if you don't want those drugs? Say, for instance, you want to live long enough to make a police report because you know who raped you. But in living long enough to make a police report, you will be outside of the parameters of the time in which that drug needs to be administered. So you will be outside of the 30 minutes, for instance. But you've said, as soon as you finish the police report, you're going to hang yourself because you cannot stand the memory of what just happened. And it doesn't matter if they lock you up in a mental institution. As soon as they let you out, you're going to kill yourself. And the doctor makes a decision and says, the state has given me, backs me with the right to interfere in your life because the state says it has a vested interest in preserving your life. I have, as a doctor, every right to make any decision that I think will preserve your life. And as Gorsuch says, all that matters is the doctor's intention. It doesn't matter how bad the outcome is, as long as the doctor intends to preserve your life. He can take whatever steps he wants to, even if it means that it actually kills your life. So the doctor forcefully administers the drug to make you forget the rape. How do I think Judge Gorsuch would see that if it made it to the Supreme Court? Is it constitutional or not? I think there is a very good chance that Judge Gorsuch would say that that doctor's action was constitutional. Well, another aspect of the Nazi regime was that it had huge institutions. I've talked about that in another video. I think there's a danger that President Trump may build those huge institutions. You can't do what the regime did without those huge institutions in which to lock people up. Number 3, speaking of huge institutions, euthanasia. I've again spoken about this at length in my other videos. Euthanasia is happening in this country, and I found it again very disappointing that Judge Gorsuch did not, I think, have the intellectual courage to address this issue, because he talks about euthanasia in the future. Well, heck, it's happening right now. I've quoted the journalist Omira, who apparently is still alive. It would be interesting to interview her and ask her if she has any further proof of what she said years ago, that more people have died in mental institutions than have fought in all the wars that America has ever fought in. Over 1 million in a 25-year span that she looked at things. Also, that with the fact that from the National Council of Disabilities.gov website, a federal government website, they have this quote from, it's not quite a coroner, I can't remember, I have the citation elsewhere in my videos written down, where the guy says most of the people coming out of the mental institutions who are dead, they're simply labeled as a heart attack, when he well knows that their deaths are highly suspicious and probably were not heart attacks. He just doesn't have the money to pursue how all these people are dying, but the deaths are suspicious. So euthanasia is alive and well in this country, and the reason we're not dealing with it is for the same reason that people in Nazi Germany didn't deal with their euthanasia. We're busy having a good time. Things are going pretty well. Those people are locked away, out of sight, out of mind, and they are considered the scum of the society. We don't care about them, just like those people in Nazi Germany didn't care about the Jews. We don't care about the people in mental institutions, whether they live or whether they're being whether they're not being treated well up until the point of death. Fourth point is the most important point, actually, and that is the Nazi regime's acceptance of unproven medical theories as the basis, one of the bases of their whole regime. We are absolutely doing that right now, and Judge Gorsuch completely misses it. With the Nazis, of course, it was the unproven theories of eugenics, racial ranking, your worth as a person according to your nationality and ethnicity. Some people were murdered, some people were sterilized, all according to where they fell on this hierarchy. All of this was the highest of medical research. Germany was considered the most advanced medical country. The doctors who came up with these theories were the most advanced medical doctors. These were not quacks. These were the best of the best that Germany had. Well, just so today in the United States, we have these incredible, unproven psychiatric theories coming out of the diagnostic manual. They are becoming so bizarre that they are almost the laughingstock of the media when we hear the latest theory that has been proposed. And every man, woman, and child from birth to death, we've heard, can now be labeled with one of these psychiatric disorders. Supposedly, perhaps you could be force drugged accordingly or incarcerated against your will accordingly. And oh gosh, brain fart. Don't you hate that when you think you have something brilliant to say and then you can't think of a darn thing to say? Well, at any rate, as my mother used to say, it couldn't have been that brilliant, Sandra. So with that, I'll sign off on this one and come back for another segment, hopefully finishing up with Judge Gorsuch the next time.